What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode when the world is calm in San Diego. Just kidding. We're actually here talking about something else that goes head-to-head in the Midwest, corn versus soybeans. Which crop will reign supreme in 2025? That's what we're going to break down today, folks. We've got some new data from the USDA that shows us where these two crops are at, and we've re-gone, figure out which one of these is gone, come out on top. I can tell you right now, it's not wheat, because we dropped an entire video on that already. You can check that out somewhere over here. It's been a while since we've talked about corn and soybeans, though, so let's get into it. The first thing that we need to look at here is just the raw numbers, right? What are these crops yielding in terms of bushels per acre? Because if one of them is yielding like 40 bushels per acre, and the other one's only yielding 15, well, it's pretty obvious which one's going to make more money. But both of these crops have actually been improving quite a bit recently. In the last 5 years or so, soybean yields have increased by almost 2 full bushels per acre, bringing the national average up to 52.6 bushels per acre. Corn has seen an even bigger improvement with an increase of 3.7 bushels per acre, bringing the national average up to 176.1. So this is good news for farmers. However, the story doesn't end there. Just because corn is yielding more than double the bushels of soybeans doesn't necessarily mean that it's making more money. And that's where things start to get interesting. Because as all of you know, corn and soybeans don't sell for the same price. They're priced differently depending on global demand, seasonality, and a host of other factors. We can see the average historical prices for both of these commodities since 2018, and we can see that soybeans have been trading around $9 per bushel, give or take. Corn has traded closer to $4 per bushel on average, but it does bounce around a little bit more than soybeans do. So we could be looking at anywhere between $3 and $6 per bushel for corn. If we were to just use a simple multiplication to figure out how much money these crops made in 2023, we would multiply the bushels per acre times the price per bushel, and that would give us the gross income per acre. Using the average bushels per acre and the average prices per bushel from 2018 through 2022, we would get $294 per acre for corn and $475 per acre for soybeans. So at first glance, it looks like soybeans win, right? Well, we're not done calculating yet. There's still some other factors that we need to account for because farming ain't cheap. There are costs associated with planting and maintaining both of these crops, and we need to account for those before we can determine which one of these is actually more profitable. In order to find out the cost of production for both of these crops, we need to look at a few different inputs. The biggest input for both of these crops is probably going to be seed. Seed prices have gone up recently for both corn and soybeans, and they are considerably more expensive than they were just a couple years ago. Corn seed prices have gone up from around $30 per bag to closer to $50 per bag. Each bag contains enough seed to plant 1/3 of an acre, meaning that the total cost per acre for corn seed has gone up from around $90 to closer to $150 per acre. Soybean seed prices have followed a similar trend, going from around $20 per bag to closer to $35 per bag. That means the total cost per acre for soybeans has gone from around $60 to closer to $105 per acre. But the seed cost isn't the only cost we need to worry about. Fertilizer is also a big one. However, fertilizer prices have cooled off a lot in the last year and are trading at around half of what they were in 2022. In 2022, farmers were paying $1,200 per ton for DAP, which is a common fertilizer used for both corn and soybeans. Now farmers are paying around $550 per ton. So if we take that $550 per ton and divide it by 20, that gives us $27.50 per acre that farmers are paying towards fertilizer. And this is just an estimate because farmers aren't buying their fertilizer in 20-ton increments. Some are buying more, some are buying less. But this is just a way to compare apples to apples. There are other inputs that go into producing both of these crops, but they're not really relevant to this conversation. Those things include things like pest management, harvesting costs, transportation costs, and a host of other miscellaneous items. These costs vary from farm to farm depending on where they're located and how they operate, but we're going to ignore those for this conversation. If we take the seed costs and the fertilizer costs and add them together, that gives us a total cost per acre of $255 for corn and $270 for soybeans. This is important to note because historically corn has had a higher cost of production than soybeans. This is the first year that we've seen soybeans come out ahead. And this is largely due to the fact that soybean seed prices have gone up a lot more than corn seed prices. So if we subtract the cost of production from the gross income that we calculated earlier, that leaves us with a profit of $38 per acre for corn and a profit of $195 per acre for soybeans. And when I say profit, I'm not trying to discount what farmers do. I know there's more to it than just subtracting to numbers. There are taxes, there are other overhead costs, there are land costs, and a host of other factors. But for the sake of simplicity, this is the best way to illustrate the difference between these two crops. It should also be noted that these are just averages across the entire United States. Actual profits will vary from region to region and state to state. So is this the death knell for corn? Should we be tearing out all of our corn acres and planting nothing but soybeans? Well, not quite. First of all, corn is a staple crop in the Midwest. Farmers rely on corn for a host of other products, like ethanol and livestock feed. Plus, corn is a very versatile crop, can be used for a whole host of different things. I actually did an entire video breaking down all of the uses for corn. You can check that out somewhere over here. Soybeans are also a very valuable crop, and they do have some benefits over corn. They fix their own nitrogen, meaning that farmers don't have to buy fertilizer for them. They also tend to be a little bit easier to grow. Corn can be a little bit more temperamental. But here's the thing. Corn tends to respond better to good weather than soybeans do. When you get a year like 2023 where there's a lot of flooding, like there was in Iowa and Wisconsin, soybeans tend to struggle a little bit more than corn does. Not always, but typically. This is why we see a lot of farmers rotate corn and soybeans. If they plant corn one year and it does really well, they'll often plant soybeans the next year, because soybeans tend to do worse when there's been a lot of rain. It's kind of a balancing act where they're hedging their bets. So if one crop does poorly because of certain weather conditions, hopefully the other one does well. And this is why it's hard to say whether corn or soybeans are definitively better. A lot of it depends on what's going on with the weather. Farmers also want to consider the market when making these decisions, because if one of the crops is expected to be in high demand, they'll likely plant more of that crop. It's all a big balancing act. And it's one of the many reasons why farming is so difficult. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I try to put out content like this every single week. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe. And if you've already subscribed, thank you. We really appreciate it. All right, you guys have a great day.